Thank you for watching, liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing right now.
We don't know what to expect in the next iPhone because they haven't actually announced the next iPhone. The only thing they've announced today is the next iteration of the iPhone operating system, which also applies to the iPod Touch and the iPad as well. Even though they say it's the iPhone OS, it applies to pretty much every one of their mobile devices. So in iPhone OS 4.0, the big news is multitasking support, but the way that Apple has handled it is somewhat different than the way other mobile carriers and mobile operating systems have provided this type of feature and functionality. Essentially, now you'd be able to run any type of application, quote unquote, in the background. That would be if you were browsing the web and you wanted to listen to your Pandora radio, you could do that, so long as the application supported the audio background or audio multitasking feature that Apple had announced today, specifically to developers. That's the real big news. Another thing that we can expect to see is, much like the iPad, users will be able to customize the wallpaper on their home screen, which just provides a little more customization options to people who have the iPhone, iPod Touch, and of course, as I said, that feature kind of already exists in the iPad. We've also seen the announcement of better organization for applications. Now, while most people may never install more than 10 apps on their iPhone or iPod Touch, I have closer to like 500, which was frustrating because I could only see 180 icons at a time. Well, Apple's instituting folders to help better organize similar applications, allowing you to group them together. So if you have a handful of games, a handful of productivity apps, maybe health and fitness apps, it just provides for a better way of getting to the things that you want to get to most frequently and knowing exactly where they are. So now, theoretically, at least according to Apple, the iPhone and the iPod Touch and the iPad will be able to support a little over 2,000 apps, which may sound like a lot, but consider there are well over 100,000 apps currently available in the iTunes App Store, and that's going to grow by leaps and bounds over time, especially as more and more magazines and newspapers start publishing, and gaming. Oh, and that's, speaking of gaming, that's the next big announcement they made, something called Game Center. At least that was the code name that they used during the announcement today. We will soon see the ability to join a game with a friend, send a notification to a friend to join a game with them, achievements, and if you will, kind of like a social network around gaming on the iPhone OS. So again, that includes the iPhone, the iPod Touch, and the iPad. The closest thing that we've seen to the Game Center on the iPhone OS is what Microsoft does with Xbox Live. So it'll be very, very interesting. We'll also soon see the ability to gift apps to friends or family members, or really to anybody. So if someone has a wish list of sorts, you could basically say, "Oh, here you go. There's an app for you." So a few small features, and then everything else, it's certainly worth talking about. But in my estimation, a lot of the announcements kind of pale by comparison. Those are the bigger ones: the games, the support for multitasking and specifically running audio in the background. Another thing to note is that Apple had acquired a company that is basically an ad-serving platform. And so they announced today iAd, I-A-D, that's how you spell it, really nice and short, and that's basically their volley into the world of inline advertisements, and that would be advertisements in applications, which is a big deal. The way that Apple's actually doing it is kind of ingenious. And I say this, very seldom am I actually impressed with advertising, but they've essentially given advertisers and marketers, and really app developers and companies, a platform to kind of create an app within an app. So think of an iAd as less of an advertisement and more of like potentially an application that could be embedded within an application. An ad is an app, if that makes any sense. So it's really unique. They're basically using open standards to empower developers and designers to create very compelling energetic, as they say, something that could touch one emotionally, these types of advertising packages. And I think that's very, very compelling. It's basically enabling apps within apps, only they're not apps, they're ads within apps, but they don't look like ads, and they don't feel like ads, but yet they work. And Apple is actually, I think, providing a pretty fair split between them and the publishers, and that would be 60-40. And that's actually extremely, extremely fair. So I'd expect to see quite a few marketing agencies start developing iAds, and I think everybody else could basically take a page out of Apple's book as far as that's concerned. I think we've kind of moved past the days of a banner ad or even a text link. The more engaging something is, the more uptake it's going to have. In fact, I would go as far as to predict that some advertisements could be apps themselves. In fact, some apps are advertisements, but the advertisement may be more interesting than the app in which the advertisement was placed. So that was interesting, but I think a few people really understood the value of that, specifically with how many impressions, a billion a day, that Apple could very well serve up using their platform. I mean, there's a lot of people who are using these apps, and a lot of them happen to be free, and they're supported by ads. Well, at first I was a little dismayed that we didn't hear anything about the new hardware, but I was kindly reminded that they usually announce that at WWDC, which is the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference. So we'd expect to see a new iPhone announcement, well before that it actually hits the streets. But what's more interesting is that, as I was talking about this iPhone OS 4.0, it'll be an upgrade for existing iPhone 3G and 3GS customers. It'll also be an upgrade for iPod Touch customers. And then, of course, they'll be releasing a different version for the iPad. Something to note, though, only iPhone 3GS users will be able to take advantage of the multitasking features, just because it's a faster system. It's something that can handle more than one thing at a time versus the older iPhone 3G, which is now, a couple years old. So, we'll expect to hear more about the next level of hardware and potentially even more features in the OS in the coming months, certainly before they actually ship it. I don't know if I'd really care to speculate about if the iPhone's moving to Verizon. They've been saying that for, 3 years now. So it hasn't happened yet. Will it happen? Maybe. Who knows if Apple wants to stay competitive. But, right now it's kind of Apple's game to lose, and I don't think they're in any position to need to shuffle providers. And AT&T is pretty happy because they gain more customers because they've got exclusivity with the iPhone. I'd have to look up the dates for you. I'm not terribly sure since I'm not a developer myself. Well, of course we know that Microsoft's releasing the Microsoft Phone 7. I think that's what they're calling it now, or the Windows Phone 7. It's still a horrible name. The platform, however, is great. It's outstanding, but we won't see that until the holiday season. So by the time that rolls around, we'll have seen the updates to the new iPhone OS in how many millions of iPhones? And we'll also see new iPhone hardware by then. So, Microsoft is kind of on the starting block, so to speak, with their new device. It looks to be, pretty amazing, and I'm sure they're going to have some good stories around it. But they're really going to have to play catch up. It was rather humorous, I thought, in watching some of the statistics that Apple was showing, and I'm sure it could be backed up by a variety of others, showing the mobile browser usage. The market share is going to Apple on mobile browser usage, seconded by Android devices from Google, and then third, I think it was BlackBerry, and then there was like 8 or 9% other. So it was rather humorous. I mean, Microsoft or Windows Mobile wasn't even mentioned. It really hasn't been much to mention for the past, I can't even tell you how many years. But that being said, Microsoft should be making some bold, swift moves over the next year. But, by the time they get something out the gate, Apple could trump them with a feature, or whether that's hardware feature or whether that's a software feature. I mean, the biggest complaints that people have had about the iPhone have been constantly addressed every year. Even up to today. I mean, one of the complaints has been, well, I can't multitask. And so while Google Android users might say, well, I can listen to Pandora in the background, well, that becomes less of an issue once everybody has the update to the latest iPhone OS revision, at least with the latest hardware, because then it supports that feature. And in this game, it really doesn't matter if you're the first. I mean, it's impressive that you're the first, but you got to be the best. And that's the reason why is because we're in this constant state of evolution, not just the internet in general, but gadgets and gizmos. I mean, a gadget that was great 2 years ago, pales by comparison to today's offerings. And while I'm pretty happy with a computer that I've had for 4 years, a notebook computer, it's kind of getting, it's getting dated, not horribly so. But with mobile devices, it's a different game rather than these desktop or these computers that we've kind of been used to or chained to for all these years. I, for one, am looking forward to seeing and trying an HP Slate. I don't know if I'm necessarily in the market for it, but just to add to what you had suggested about it, you're absolutely right. As I've said, Windows 7 and certainly Vista and XP and anything that Microsoft's produced has not been developed with touch interfaces in mind. Just hasn't. And every effort that's been made to overlay touch on top of something that doesn't support touch is akin to putting lipstick on a pig. Now, I'm not suggesting that Windows 7 is a pig. It's a great operating system. Don't get me going on Vista, though. I can't even go there. It's a joke, really. People ask me, is this software Vista compatible? And I always joke. I say, well, Vista isn't even Vista compatible. Windows 7 is a different story altogether. As a Windows 7 device, the HP Slate may be absolutely amazing. It's going to have all the features, super, super portable. It's going to have the power. But as far as a touch device is concerned, that's laughable. HP's created some okay experiences with their Touch Smart series, and no doubt that's the same code they'll be using on the HP Slate, but will the screen be as responsive? Don't know. No one's used it. The bottom line is, ultimately, you're going to have to deal with Windows, and you're going to have to deal with software that comes with Windows, or you're going to have to deal with Windows software that wasn't designed with touch in mind. And that's where it gets frustrating to use touch. And people don't seem to understand that. They think, oh, well, it's a PC and I can do anything. Yeah, okay, sure, good luck with that. But, I think HP would have a better effort if it was running the next iteration of Microsoft's mobile device operating system rather than Windows. For a big reason, because the Windows Phone 7, or whatever they're calling it, that's due out in the holiday season, was designed with touch in mind. It belongs on a device that supports touch. Windows does not belong on a device that does not support touch. Like, hang on, did I say that right? I got so frustrated. I don't know if I even said that right. Yeah, you should be terrified, actually. No, yeah, well, let me try that again if I didn't say it the right way. Windows is really designed for systems with keyboards and mice as the input devices. Beyond that, it's kind of a kludge. And that's what I think is going to be the HP's biggest shortcoming with the Slate. Like I said, I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm a gadget freak, but I'm not really expecting much, just based on experiences I've had that had said, well, we're just going to develop software that's going to make it touch capable. Well, come on, dude. Really? Really? Okay. That doesn't make any sense in the grander scheme of things. If your foundation isn't much, I mean, HTC tried this with Windows Mobile. They had this great overlay on top of Windows Mobile, but they just could not escape the plumbing of Windows Mobile. Inevitably, you'd have to interface with it. You had to deal with its shortcomings. Not to mention, and even though some folks would lambaste Apple for having a closed ecosystem, a closed platform, I can pretty much guarantee you will never need to install antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-pop-up, anti-this, anti-that, etc. on an iPhone or an iPad or an iPod Touch. Try saying the same thing about a Windows system where you could run anything that you want to. So it's got its benefits, but it's also got its drawbacks. It'll be, I'm sure, a fantastic Windows PC, but in terms of competition to the iPad, I don't think so. I don't understand how they compare, because they don't.